Well, someone's heading to Bahrain, and it's none other than Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. That is what the Israeli leader has just announced this morning. He says that he spoke with Bahrain's Crown Prince and Prime Minister Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa, who invited him to visit the Gulf nation just months after the countries normalized their ties. Well, this development follows the first ever visit by a Bahraini foreign minister to Israel last week, and joining us right now is our correspondent, Owen Alterman. All right, it looks like we're having a bit of an issue here. There we go. So, Owen, first of all, when is this visit actually going to take place?
Natasha, potentially as soon as next week. Some different, in some ways conflicting reports in Israeli media over the course of the last few hours to the effect that Netanyahu wants to go early next week, but there's a question of whether he'll combine Bahrain with the UAE, whether the final coordination will happen. But again, he seems to want to head there next week. Something does seem to be brewing. And obviously, we know how much Netanyahu loves to travel and how much he basks in the glory of these trips. And I don't think anyone would begrudge him this one. It's obviously a legitimate diplomatic achievement to have this normalization. And I think for all Israelis, will be really stunning to see the pictures of an Israeli prime minister in a Gulf state and an open visit.
Well, what will a visit to Bahrain on the part of the Israeli prime minister mean for relations between the two countries?
Well, listen, the relations are already moving forward. We saw that with the visit of the foreign minister of Bahrain last week to Jerusalem. The agreements are being signed, including the agreement on flights and the agreement on visas, and that's going to be happening over the next few weeks. But of course, there's obviously symbolic meaning to have the leader of the country go and visit, certainly in a case like this one. And obviously, it will be very, very meaningful to see Netanyahu there. It's a show of seriousness in the Bahrainis about how important the relationship is to them. They want to keep the momentum moving and keep this relationship moving forward. We also have Natasha, Israeli Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi, set to travel to Bahrain himself to dedicate the Israeli embassy there. Also going to be a powerful symbolic moment.
Now, the peace deal with Bahrain definitely did not make as many headlines as the deal with the UAE. I think that's fair to say. But what kind of cooperation could we see coming up between the two countries? I mean, how will both best benefit from this normalization deal?
I think the contours are similar, Natasha. Obviously, tourism to some degree, although less so, I think, than in the case of the UAE. Cyber technology, fintech, and so on and so forth. The Bahrainis are very, very interested in. And I think we would have to say security. Obviously, the Bahrainis have serious security concerns in terms of Iran. The government there very, very concerned about Iranian influence in the country, given the country's demographics and its Shia majority. So one would expect that there would be security cooperation, or one would have to say continued security cooperation between the two countries, and that would be part of the relationship. Again, not that that hasn't been happening up until now. By all accounts, it has. But even in the security arena, Natasha, you would think that much more could be done, particularly technology sharing, particularly with the private sector, now that this is all above board and open and normalized than it could be done in the past.
Now, we saw reports that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has just visited Saudi Arabia for a meeting with the Crown Prince. Israeli officials seem to be confirming that, but the Saudis are denying this alleged meeting, even though Saudi Arabia has also been designated as a green country for Israelis, despite the fact that locals can't generally visit the nation. So what is going on here? I mean, why are we seeing these differing reports from both sides?
Look, two theories. One theory is that the Israelis and the Saudis simply weren't on the same page about this, that Netanyahu, out of self-interest politically, leaked the visit to Israeli supporters fairly widely, we should say, and that it was at his initiative, without the Saudis knowing about it, for his own personal gain. That's the theory, for example, of alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz, who attacked Netanyahu for doing it. That's one theory. The other theory is that this was planned and coordinated between the two sides. The Saudis would more or less deny it, while the Israelis would leak it, and in that sense would be a quasi-public visit, obviously not public in the sense of Netanyahu's potentially upcoming visit to Bahrain, but that it would be something that would be known, even if it weren't to be officially acknowledged. There's support for this school of thought in large parts of the Israeli media who are describing this as a quasi-public visit, so there may be some truth to that. I guess we'll have some sense of this in the months to come to see how this relationship develops.